Good evening, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order. On to item 2 on the agenda. Items added. Any items to be added by unanimous consent? If not, I'll need a motion to approve the agenda. It's been moved by Councillor Boucher. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Second by Deputy Warden Martel. On discussion. Questions called. All those in favor put up your right hand. Motion carried. Item 3, review of the minutes for October the 15th, 2019. Any errors or omissions? Not. It's been moved by Councillor Boucher. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gayesh. Seconded. On discussion? Questions called. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion carried. On to the presentations this evening. We're going to do them in the order that they are on the agenda. So, Emily Pond is the first presentation. Is it on the screens up there? You can hit one of the left side of the red buttons.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. My name is Emily Pond. I am the Director of Partnerships and Regulatory Modernization with the Department of Regulatory Affairs and Service Effectiveness. I have had the privilege of working with this council actually lots in my former role as municipal advisor and then as director for governance and advisory services. So it's really nice to be back in Richmond. Thanks for the awesome weather. It was a nice drive. So I'm here tonight to present our work plan, which is part of our pilot partnership with the office and all 5 municipalities in Cape Breton. In terms of the flow of the presentation, I'm going to provide a little bit of context for why our office was created. Then I'm going to talk about what our office does before giving some highlights from the work plan. I think you all have a copy of the work plan, so I won't go through that line by line, but I just wanted to draw your attention to a few items. Before I get started, I just wanted to thank the folks here from the Cape Breton Partnership. It was really through their support and the support of the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce that we were able to organize stakeholder sessions throughout the summer and fall, which gave us insight into the issues being faced by businesses in Cape Breton. It would have been impossible for me to organize that from my office in downtown Halifax because I don't know what I don't know, and I don't have the connections here. So it was really, really helpful, and Carla, Amanda, and their teams were really supportive of our work. So thank you, and thanks for being here tonight on such a crappy night. So just to start out, some context for why our office was created. A couple of reports came out in 2014, one of which everyone is aware of. It's become known just as the Ivany report, which was, as the cover of the report suggests, a call to action. Essentially what it said is, if we do more of the same, we can expect more of the same, which would be a shrinking economy and declining infrastructure, aging population, declining population. And if we wanted things to be different, we would have to do things differently, and it would require action by government, yes, but also by civil society. A lesser-known report that came out around the same time was written by the now CEO of Nova Scotia Business Inc. Her name is Laurel Broughton, and that report focused on the tax and regulatory regime in Nova Scotia. So it's not surprising that it was just slightly less popular than the Ivany report. We spend a lot of time as society thinking about taxation and the impact that that has on us personally and on the economy, but maybe a little bit less time thinking about regulation and the impact that that has. But what both reports highlighted was that if we have a modern, lean regulatory regime, that can help our economy. So if there are excessive rules, red tape stifles growth. If you have an efficient regulatory environment, that can support the growth of our economy. And one of the ways that we can achieve that is through alignment. So either regionally in the Atlantic region, or provincially, nationally across provinces, or of course with municipalities and the province. So our office was created after those two reports came out, and they both mentioned the regulatory environment as an opportunity to support our economy. Our office was created in 2015, and the first ever Chief Regulatory Officer, which is a deputy level position, someone was hired for that role. So we have a narrow mandate. It's not simple to achieve, but what we try to do is reduce barriers to doing business in Nova Scotia. So we do that in three broad ways. The first is by measuring the impact of regulatory burden on business. The second is by looking at efficiencies in service. And the third is by working with other orders of government. So I'll just quickly explain a little bit about what we do in each of those areas. So just some foundational work that our office does. The Premier, and actually all four Atlantic Premiers, have signed on to a Charter of Principles. And just sort of at a very high level, what the Charter says is that regulation will not be the first thing that we do. So if something happens, sometimes government's reaction is to regulate. We want to do something about an issue, put a law, put a regulation, a policy in place. We want to change that. It's not an anti or a deregulation mandate, but we want to make sure that we have smart regulations and that we aren't regulating unnecessarily. If we do have to regulate, which is sometimes very important for the safety of citizens or consumers or the environment, we want to make sure that we take the lightest touch as possible. We want to make sure that we're actually going to achieve what we've set out to do, so do a cost-benefit analysis. We want to make sure that we're transparent about what we're doing and consult with the people who are going to be impacted in a really meaningful way. And for the Premier's Charter, we wanted to create alignment between all four Atlantic provinces. So all four Premiers signed the same charter. We're empowered as an office through a standalone piece of legislation. It refers to our charter. It kind of sets up our office. We are required, like all departments, to do an annual report. But kind of in the spirit of what we're doing, we didn't want to create an office to add red tape to the process of creating laws and regulation for the provincial government. We made sure that our office would actually be reviewed after 3 years, and if it cost more than the benefit that we provided, then the office wouldn't continue. So just this October, the office and the act was reviewed, and we're renewed, which is good. So back to the three ways that we reduce barriers to doing business in Nova Scotia. The first is measurement. So if you don't know the impact of the regulations and the laws and the policies that you put in place, it's difficult to kind of keep track of it. So we hired consultants that looked at what is the overall burden faced by business. They determined it was about $560 million annually, and about $20 million of that was caused by the provincial government. In order to set a goal, because we wanted to have something to work towards, we needed to develop a way of measuring what we were doing. So we built a really sophisticated cost calculator that looks at out-of-pocket costs, but also other costs to businesses when you put in place a regulation. So, for example, if a business has to send somebody to a registry to get a particular permit, the calculator would consider which level of staff do you have to send, what would they be doing if they weren't driving to the registry, how much does gas cost, all of those things. So it's a really fulsome review of the cost that our regulations have on businesses. And departments and agencies, when they want to create laws or regulations that have to go before the legislature, they have to do one of these reviews. So with that information and that tool, we set a goal, a target of reducing burden to business by $25 million. And As of last December, the end of last December, we exceeded that target. We saved $34 million for Nova Scotia businesses, and that's annual, so every year those savings will be realized. Of course, we don't want to just rest on our laurels. We set a few new targets this year. We're going to add $10 million to that $34 million with the goal of reducing business by around $45 million annually for businesses. We're also expanding kind of the areas that we work in to look at citizens because, as you know, it's not only businesses that red tape affects. Anybody who's had to renew their health card or stand in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles to get your license renewed knows that there is also burden on citizens in terms of time spent kind of complying with government rules, even if they're important rules. So we'd like to work with Service Nova Scotia, we are working with Service Nova Scotia to save citizens time, and our target is 50,000 hours this year. And we are also leading a kind of housekeeping initiative with government. As you can imagine, over time, there's legislation on the books that no longer is relevant or is duplicative, and so we want to remove that just so that we have a better sense of the number of regulations that we have, and so that it is less confusing for people who are trying to comply when there are different versions or sometimes conflicting information or out-of-date laws that don't need to be in place anymore. So the second way that we look at reducing barriers to doing business in Nova Scotia is by improving service. So what we heard when we talked to business owners was, yes, the rules are complicated, but it's also problematic when you have a piece of legislation or regulation in front of you and you have a question and you call government and you can't get a person on the phone, or you get somebody on the phone and they give you incomplete information, or you talk to two different people and they say two different things. So to improve that situation for businesses specifically, we hired 3 business navigators. They are not regulation specialists, they're customer service specialists. Actually, 2 of the 3, the first 2, Vange and Andre, are both Cape Bretoners. And they act as a liaison between the business owner and government. And it's not a call center, they're case managers, so they personally walk businesses through from whatever stage the business is at when they call, right through to when they no longer need their services. So since 2017, they've been able to help 4,000 businesses, and they get awesome reviews because they're really great with working with people, which is not a quality that all government employees have, which I feel like I can say as a government employee. The third way that we reduce barriers to doing business in Nova Scotia is by working with different governments. So we work across the country through the Canada Free Trade Agreement. There are committees which are our deputy chairs. We work regionally, as I mentioned, in the Atlantic area with all of the provinces have signed the Premier's Charter of Principles. And then we also work with municipalities. So our first foray into working with municipalities was with HRM. So we started that pilot in 2016. Again, it's really important for us for our work to be grounded in the needs of business. So we have an advisory panel that is made up of the Chamber of Commerce and Canadian Federation of Independent Business. They chair our panel, the Halifax Partnership, NSFM. So Juanita Spencer is on our advisory panel. And you know, we just chose a few small things to try to improve. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We're not trying to solve huge issues. We wanted to do things like make it easier to open a patio in Halifax, or make it easier to change a light bulb in a sign, which at the beginning of when we started required 2 permits and, you know, a pedestrian management plan. So little things, but they add up and they are real irritants to business, and it's not necessary. So we won a national award for this innovative approach. Municipalities in the provinces aren't working on this front together very many places in Canada. And the pilot was extended for another 18 months. We have a new work plan, and little by little we're starting to take on bigger projects. But the way that we work is to start small, pick a couple of small things, actually accomplish them, and then, you know, pick up a little bit of momentum. So we wanted to expand our work with municipalities And because the 5 municipalities in Cape Breton work well together on economic development through the Cape Breton Partnership and Regional Enterprise Network Program, and because many of the partners work together in planning with Eastern District Planning, we thought if we could shore up some of that work and support some of that work, then that would be a great thing. So over the summer, as I mentioned at the very beginning of my presentation, we worked with the Cape Breton Partnership and the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce to organize stakeholder sessions and invited businesses, and we just asked them, what issues are you facing? What issues did you face when you opened? What issues are you facing when you try to expand? And we used that information to identify a few pain points, and it was really interesting, the commonalities between the areas where we hosted the sessions and across the different sectors that people worked in. The same things were kind of, irritating to them, which are in large part the same things that businesses in HRM talk about as well. So with that input in mind, together with the CAOs, we built a work plan. And again, we've kind of taken the approach of just putting a few things in the work plan for the first year. There are kind of shorter term goals and some more longer term aspirational goals that we'll work towards. Some of them are squarely the responsibility of the participating municipalities, and some of the items are for the province to do, because we certainly have a role both in terms of getting our own house in order, but also in terms of empowering municipalities to do this work that they want to do. So, as I said, I'm not going to go through the plan line by line, but of course, if you have any questions about specific issues, you can ask me. But I just thought I would draw a few things to your attention under our different focus areas. So the first section of the plan talks about the red tape reduction priority actions, and it's divided between municipal and provincial. One of the municipal ones you guys are already done. So some businesses complained that in some areas they can't access bylaws. The bylaws aren't online, or they may conflict with what they have in paper. And so we thought as a first step, before kind of considering what bylaws are necessary or where there could be alignment, we should first just figure out what we're dealing with. What bylaws does everybody have? And let's put them on the website so that the most up-to-date version is there for businesses and citizens for whom those bylaws apply. So I looked at your website today. You already have your bylaws up there, so we can put a check next to that. One provincial item under the red tape reduction priority actions was inspector training and business navigation support. So one thing that the province will be able to support municipalities through is making it easier for building inspectors to get trained. So right now, much of the training is in person and in Halifax. So we don't know what that solution will look like. Maybe there'll be an online solution. Maybe there'll be regional sessions. We really don't know. It could be a whole host of different things. But with forthcoming changes around accessibility, there'll be a requirement for additional inspection, and we know that. And Department of Municipal Affairs is committed to working through this project and otherwise to address a shortage of inspectors that's being faced in Cape Breton and right across the province. And in terms of strengthening government-to-government collaboration, I'll just draw your attention to a couple of items. The first is something that the province is going to do. We heard that provincial regulations can make it difficult for festivals or events to run smoothly in Cape Breton, and certainly where culture and tourism are priorities in Cape Breton Island, the province doesn't want to be the reason why things can't get kind of up and going. So we don't know what the solution will look like, but we want to address issues around the permits and inspections related to special events. As you know, there was a recent legislative change that requires comprehensive land use plans for all municipalities. So through this work, we will support the development of a regional land use plan. So that's not saying that everything that Inverness and Victoria have in a land use plan would work in Richmond, but where there are commonalities, let's see if we can work together, and let's see if there's an opportunity for some cost sharing with the province if the plan is regional in nature. In terms of measurement and assessment, we thought about, does it make sense for the municipalities to consider adopting the Charter of Principles and using the business impact assessment? And we thought, let's start slow before we jump right into something. So what we would like to do over the course of the next 15 to 18 months or 12 to 18 months is come to council and do a presentation on the Premier's Charter of Principles and kind of gauge interest. We'd also like to meet with staff and talk about the business impact assessment and see if something could be right-sized so that if proposals come to council, you have a sense of the impact they're having on businesses, but certainly no goals of adopting either of those right away, because we'd want to make sure that there was a willingness and a real deep understanding of both of those items before we proceeded. And then the final category or focus area of the report is just communication and reporting. And the most important thing for you to know is that we want to make sure that we communicate with you as we go and also with our stakeholders. So we have a robust stakeholder list now from our sessions, and we have committed to keeping them in the loop. We reported back to them very quickly after our sessions and summarized what we heard. We'll share the work plan with them once it's gone to every council. And we're going to keep you updated on the progress that we make. So I am very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any questions from any councillors? Councillor Gayash.
Yes, Emily, is there any difference between the urban and rural areas? Like, I know the urban centers, it's easy to regulate because the regulatory system or places where you do business is easily accessible. But when you talk about rural areas, I mean, if I have to get permits or any kind of do business, I have to go to a registry system which is way down in Sydney. And if I can't go, then I got to get a lawyer, which costs a lot of money, in order to access these the issues that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I know if you're in an urban center, it's easy, everything is there. But when you're in a rural area, I wonder if there a difference, the impact of what, in order to do business, I think it's easier in the...
Yeah, we asked that question specifically in some of our sessions. Does anybody get in the car to go anywhere anymore for any of the permits that they require? And we had a very small sample, so I definitely wouldn't suggest that this is the case for everybody. But the folks that we met said no, that they could do most things online or over the phone. But there are differences, I guess, some differences between the urban areas that we met and the more rural areas. In the urban areas, like specifically CBRM, they're dealing with one municipality, where maybe if you're a developer in rural Cape Breton, you do work in Richmond, Inverness, and Victoria, and so you're kind of contending with three different sets of rules. Not that any are better than the other, just that they're different, and the understanding the differences just takes time. So that would be one thing. Yeah, but we didn't hear a lot about people having to get in their car and go anywhere. I wonder if those are more provincial matters, but that wasn't a prominent theme.
Now, when you talk about strengthening government-to-government collaboration, I know we're talking about permits and inspections.
Yeah.
And you're saying this is for business, but what about in the summertime when it comes to festivals and events? And these are mostly done by non-profit, volunteer organizations. And they have to go through a great deal as far as gaining permits and licenses in order to put on certain events. And it's getting to be a very costly affair. And I wonder if we could expand the service to assist these non-profit organizations.
Yes.
That want to put on events and apply, and they go through a great deal of difficulty and expense.
Yes, so we did hear that, and we are including that in the scope of the work. So many of the organizations that would be organizing those festivals would be not-for-profit. And our solution, in terms of making it easier for inspections and permits, would include supporting those organizations, absolutely, as they're often the ones, except for probably for the very biggest festivals, that are doing the work. So absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any more questions? Deputy Warden Martel.
Emily, welcome back.
Thank you.
One more round. I guess that the report is very lot of insight. I mean, this is stuff that's been going on forever. From a for me, from a municipal perspective, we don't have a lot of say. It's pretty well all provincial. The rules are being made by the province. The bylaws we set are kind of, don't affect businesses hardly. And I think there's a myth out there where residents and people believe that municipal government should be doing economic development. Now, having said that, I believe in economic development. I've worked in it for a lot of years. But I think that the economic development needs to be done by businesses, not by municipalities. I mean, municipalities should be there to support business, and if they need infrastructure or they need certain things. But as far as for municipalities and councillors and staff to be taxed with the fact that they should be creating jobs, I don't think that's possible, in my experience. So a lot of this is bang on. There's a lot of provincial stuff that's redundant. I'm sure there's all kinds of regulations and bylaws that were made like 20 years ago that aren't relevant today.
120.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a great place to start. Number one is to kind of weed those out and use the ones that are relevant and the ones that use today. And I mean, things have changed so much over the last 20 years with the technology and stuff that people do that these regulations just don't apply anymore. So I'm glad to see you guys are doing this, and I think it's a great project, and I certainly look forward to having some information as it unfolds.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martel.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Any more questions? Emily, the page where you were saying you aim for 25 million in savings and you save 34 million, can you give some examples for business?
Yeah. So I will give you a copy of I'll send electronically a copy of our annual report, which outlines by department each of the initiatives. But I know that Service Nova Scotia has worked very closely with the office, for example, moving the registry of joint stocks online. There's been work done also in terms of business numbers. So if you are extra provincial business numbers, kind of streamlining that process. So I don't have all of those off the top of my head, but I know that there have been many departments that have contributed to that target. So we definitely attribute the success of exceeding that goal to working closely with them, because we don't have legislation that we own other than the act that creates our office. So the legislative change are all through the different departments. But I can get you that information of the specific initiatives.
Okay. The point of saving 5,000 hours for the citizens, and you mentioned like the healthcare, the licenses, and the permits. How are you going to save the time for the people in redoing these, other than having it online, and not all the seniors are online? So they're still going, as Councillor Gayash states, they're still having to go somewhere.
Right.
So for those things, how do you save people time?
So our department is going to work closely with the department or the Office of Service Nova Scotia, because they are the ones that are responsible for lots of those processes. So again, I'm not intimately familiar with what exactly they'll be doing to save those hours, but I can get back to you on that, because I know that Joan Penny, who's the executive director in our office responsible for the service side of things, is working really closely with the deputies at Service Nova Scotia to identify areas. So those examples that I gave about the health card and the standing in line at the motor vehicle, those are just sort of anecdotal. I'm not sure if those are the areas that they're going to target first. I do think that there are lots of areas that I think there's lots of choices for them. But it is a good question with the digital divide with seniors. So I will get back to you on that. I know that they will not move services online and leave anybody without an option, for in-person. But you're right, that sometimes does require travel, so that is a consideration for sure. So I can get back to you on that as well.
Now, in reference to registry of joint stocks, you mentioned that, so you're making me think, and going back to what Councillor Gayesh says, there's a lot of volunteer organizations that are having to get this done, and it seems the ones that I talk to, they're very frustrated at this whole process, because it seems documents are sent back twice, 3 times, just because of errors that are made on the other side. These are volunteers, and they're registering a not-for-profit group. I'm wondering, is that even needed for these groups? It seems they need a registry to get grants. They need to be registered or have this certificate. But I mean, these are volunteer groups that are trying to do good in each community. And I'm sure there's enough of them right across Nova Scotia. So to me, things like that, when you're talking of cutting red tape, would be something. And in the area of this land use planning for
Yes.
all of Nova Scotia, that's something that really gets to me. You know, we're talking about cutting red tape and getting rid of regulations, and now we're forcing the whole province to become zoned and planned and have municipal planning strategies, which aren't things good as they are right now. You know, you're adding more red tape and bureaucracy and millions of dollars in cost to the taxpayers when, you know, we have things like health, education, our roads, and social services that are suffering. And here we are going to spend millions of dollars on planning areas that could be wooded, you know. So if there's something you can do about that, do it.
Well, I think
Because
that
that's-
one advantage will be that if you work together with your neighboring municipalities who are in very similar situations to you in terms of not having plans at this time, you know, even if you work together and you didn't get cost sharing, there'd probably be some opportunities to save just because you'd be going out together and kind of economies of scale. But then there has been you know, discussion with municipalities that if they did shared land use plans, that there might be some opportunity for funding from municipal affairs. So if you cost shared a regional plan, it would be more, it would be less expensive than if you went ahead and did your own plan. So I think that there is some opportunity to reduce those costs through this work.
But here we are looking to reduce regulatory, the permitting and any of that, and we're adding more here to people that want to develop their land. They might have to rezone, meetings, all of that. You know, where some areas are not zoned, people can do what they want with their land.
Yeah,
So I have, you know, I have a big issue with this because we zone areas, so we say it's for this, it's for that, but we allow rezoning. And for this council, rezoning has always been contentious. Somebody is going to be upset,
right,
and it comes down to here.
yes.
You know, so when the EDPC is supposed to manage that, but the final decision is ours. And it's just like for the planning right across. Our Eastern District Planning Commission has been very clear. They do not have the resources to do it, and it's going to cost quite a bit.
Yeah, so we don't have a mandate of deregulation, just smart regulation. So we're definitely not trying just to reduce all regulation. And I think you're right. We need to put that lens on the development of a regional land use plan or a land use plan for Richmond County to make sure that it is a light touch. We don't want to go in and use something that makes sense for CBRM or for HRM. You want to make sure it's right-sized for this community, and that you're not over-regulating, and that you don't just have a bunch of people coming in and making amendments because you've been too prescriptive. I absolutely agree. You know, the fact that you have to have a comprehensive land use plan, that's law now. So now that that is the case, we'll work within those bounds and try to make sure that as we proceed, we do take that approach, that we're not being too prescriptive with what people have to do, but we also consider statements of provincial interest and other considerations like the environment and whatever else you consider when you develop a land use plan, which isn't my area of expertise, and it is of people in this room. So.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you.
Presentation, and we look forward to hearing more information on this.
Awesome. Thanks very much. And I'll get you that information.
Yeah, just email it to all of us. Okay, our next presenter is David Harrison on the age-friendly plan. You're going to read that word for word,
No
right?
way.
Oh, jeez.
How long do you have? Warden Marchand and members of council, thanks for involving me in this initiative. I'd like to say how many municipalities have actually taken this step, and I'm afraid I don't quite know. This is my 5th initiative, so I know that 5 municipal governments have undertaken this effort. I believe there are more. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through, really at a high level, what the plan is and how it works. And it's almost the latter that's as important to understand. So I've been a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners since 1986, and my involvement with the National Institute, this is the 100th year, by the way, of the urban planning profession in Canada. My involvement nationally was I chaired the Institute's Healthy Communities program for 5 years. But my main business, my main role as a development consultant is in seniors and affordable housing. I've done about 32 different projects over the last 18 years. And that's a range of roles, including plan applications, feasibility studies, and also project management. And I mentioned the 5 age-friendly plans that I've helped facilitate. Those are in New Glasgow, Pictou County, the District of Chester, Victoria County, Main Street in Dartmouth, and here. So I'll give you an overview on how the plan was developed. I was retained in January. And the first phase was really research. There were a couple components of it. The bulk of the document is actually the community profile. So it pulls statistics together from a range of sources. And also Stats Canada data, which is parked at the back of the document. So most of the document is actually research, information on the community and on employment, education, labor force, housing characteristics, and demographic characteristics. I did a bit of original research. I always do this work. This is to document your seniors' housing, not your needs, but what you have. And we're going to look at that this evening. A steering committee was set up, and then between April and August was the consultation phase. The steering committee met 6 times. And then I did 19 different telephone and face-to-face interviews, including members of council. And staff had the document for a couple of months. There were some very minor revisions. And so here we are. The steering committee had representatives from the municipality, Nova Scotia Community Links, Schools Plus at École Beaufort, the Dr. Kingston Memorial Clinic, Potlatech First Nation, Seniors Take Action Coalition, the Health Authority. Your MLA, Alana Paon, came in late, didn't actually attend any telephone meetings, but she was receiving the documentation. I'm going to look at 3 of these goals tonight, not in detail. We're going to take a look at housing, community economic development, and implementation. The other goals that are in the document are natural and built environments, community transportation services, social inclusion, social participation and civic engagement, community health, and awareness and communications. In the next slide, you'll see how these are divided up. Firstly, the goals are divided into objectives. So an objective takes a goal and it divides it into more bite-sized pieces. And then there are actions attached to the objectives. Obviously, there are more actions than objectives, meaning some of the objectives have more than one action associated with them. It sort of follows this principle. If you start at the bottom, we want to get to actions because actions are measurable. And I talked about the division of goals, objectives, and then actions. But when we undertake action, we're really exercising community leadership. The method here is meant to be flexible. At this point, I don't believe anyone really knows how much progress or what success we'll have with 38 actions. My thought is that some of them, and hopefully a lot of them, can be achieved. But because of issues in your community context, and we're always in a bit of a reactive mode, we really don't know how firm this document will be. So it has to be flexible, and that flexibility is built in. So it's a strategy of being flexible, but also quite focused on doing some things. This is a slide I use in a lot of my planning exercises. It was developed by the Annapolis Valley First Nation. I did a strategic plan with the AVFN. And when you look at implementing things, I like to suggest we start with low-hanging fruit. Those are easy to do. They're fairly short-term. We have time to consider the more complicated actions, and we want them to be accomplished hopefully in a couple of years. In the document, I believe it's on page 41, you'll see how the actions are aligned with the various champions, and you'll see them aligned whether we think or it's suggested they can start within 6 months or 12 months or 18 months. And that is just a thumbnail of when actions might be anticipated. The longer term ones are high-hanging fruit. They're going to take more time, probably more resources, and they will likely take longer than 24 months. Another technique that's in the document is something called the idea bank. That's on page 43. So through the consultation efforts with the steering committee, there were a number of actions that were suggested. Not all of them could be attached to a champion being an individual or an organization that might be willing or would undertake an action. It doesn't mean they're not good ideas. It just means we haven't really pinpointed what or how or when some of these things would take place. So they sit in something that I've coined the idea bank, and it functions a lot like a bank. We'll talk about the implementation method in a minute, but actions can be deposited or withdrawn from this document, from the idea bank. And I like to frame a good idea as one that's going to get implemented. So there may be some very good ideas in the idea bank, but until we have actually someone assigned or designated to undertake something, we won't know that. If you're going to recommend approval of the plan, the most important thing to do at the outset, and this is for the municipality to do, is to form an age-friendly community team. That would be really to take over the role of the steering committee in providing oversight for the document, to review the plan on a semi-annual basis, make adjustments to the goals as might be required and the objectives and the actions, considered all opportunities for implementing the actions, add any new ones, or implement actions contained in the idea bank. So what will happen when this structure gets set up, this age-friendly community team, is that new ideas will come to the table, or something that was framed before needs to be adjusted a little bit and maybe involve more players. The process, all of the goals have issues and opportunities that were identified by the stakeholders or by the steering committee. And this is an important one given not so much the size of the document in terms of the number of pages, because as I mentioned, a lot of the document is statistical. But it's really important that the community have a high degree of ownership on the age-friendly plan, and then its implementation and directions being proposed. This is not exclusively a government document. This is for the municipality to participate in and for the age-friendly community team to provide oversight on. The only way that we can really move forward on making change, and I think you'll find that this is a good change management process and document, is that we have to understand or be aware of the community's capacity to implement new ideas and then affect that change. And it's a problem, not just here, because there are limits to the level of volunteer involvement, and there's certainly limits to the municipality's ability to support any of the initiatives in here. But you're not asked to support everything. I don't believe there's any financial commitment in the document to start off with, but you will need to commit some staff resources. If you look at the back of the document, the very last page, it gives the terms of reference for the age-friendly community team, and it's proposed that they meet 6 times a year. So that will need some staffing to manage that effort. Beyond that, as far as I'm aware, there's no financial commitment on the municipality. If there is, that's between the age-friendly community team and council to discuss and then to rationalize and put into a future budget cycle. I mentioned the seniors housing profile. There are just under, or there were, 9,000 people in the municipality in 2016. There's a population decline of about 3.5% since 2011. You also have 245 housing units for older adults at this point in time. This is documented this summer. I contacted as many private and nonprofit organizations and the government as well, the Cape Breton Housing Authority, to come up with these statistics. This is consistent with what I find elsewhere. The issue in seniors housing is a gap between living independently and nursing home care. I will suggest that if you want to explore this, the definitions can be found on page 17 of the plan. And I only highlighted long-term care because there's 2 types of care facilities that are actually regulated. The others are unregulated. And the other thing that I try to do, because I think this is extremely important, is to document that there are jobs associated with seniors housing. And I've documented 113 jobs within Richmond County in the housing and care sector. That's an estimate on my part. I don't have all the data for Richmond Villa, but I used another long-term care client of mine to come up with an estimate of it. And the Cape Breton Housing Authority, the number of administrators and maintenance is also an estimate. But still, I think it's important to connect housing with job creation and with economic development. And we'll come back to that. All of you told me that housing was either the top goal or the second top goal issue in the municipality. And so it's very important that the municipality consider its own role within housing and what can and should be done. So I've tried to point you in a direction that I hope will pay some dividends. Housing is available. This is the goal in the plan. Housing is available in response to changing needs with respect to mobility, safety, sustainability, affordability, and security. And graduated levels of care are available and integrated with age-friendly housing options. So I'm going to walk you through 3 or 4 of the action steps here because they are specific to the municipality. Objective 1 is to identify the municipality's role or roles in promoting age-friendly, affordable housing. And the first action is a suggestion that the Planning Advisory Committee become familiar with federal and provincial funding programs for affordable housing and identify the roles that the municipality can play to help leverage federal and provincial investments. This is an area I have some involvement in. The federal programs can be targeted for both private sector and nonprofit housing efforts. And the province just came out with its 3-year action plan, and there are a range of new things proposed in there, including community capacity building. And it seems a very strong emphasis on keeping people living longer in their own homes. So I'm assuming the housing grants will be maybe a little more available than they have been. These are for accessibility into existing homes, that kind of thing.
I'm confused, not confused, but I hear the word often, affordable housing.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I mean, what's affordable to you?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not affordable to me.
It's a great question, and I don't have the answer. I can tell you that in HRM there are 3 different definitions. You'll find that I don't believe there's a definition in Richmond County. The province may have one, but that's just for their programs.
But that's the problem, yes.
Yeah, it is a problem. On the other hand, if you look at the residential construction financing, or the RCF it's called, which is a CMHC financing program, that's made available if I think it's 30% of the units have rents that are 10% below the average or the medium rents in the community.
Yeah,
So
but I call that affordable housing.
Yeah.
For the landlord, but I don't call that affordable housing for the tenant. They're restricted to the amount they can charge for a certain number of years.
Yeah.
But then when that time span is up, then they can do what they want. So does that mean if I'm into one of those units that I'm there for a 4 or 5 year term?
Yeah, the previous.
Then I'm out?
Well, but there are issues with that for sure. The provincial Investment in Affordable Housing Grant, or the IAH, is the one you might have heard about. It makes up to $50,000 per unit if the applicant meets the province's definition of affordability, and they have a 15-year horizon on the commitment of that rent within the mortgage term. And there are issues associated with that, but they're also reviewing that. So I don't even know if the IAH is available. That's why it's important for PAC to understand these new financing programs and to ask that type of question, Councillor Goyesh.
Yeah, what I mean by affordable is that if I'm in a unit and my income cannot support the rent that the government or Province of Nova Scotia, through their assistance program for seniors, pay the difference.
Yeah.
And that's what I call affordable housing. Subsidize, pay the rent, what's above my norm that I can afford. But there's got to be a standard there. Because a lot of these people that go into what they call affordable housing cannot afford the affordable housing.
That's right.
So that's my problem.
It's a very large issue.
It is.
And that's why I think heading down a path of gaining some knowledge and maybe some saying, well, what can we do? And you're not, if it is the top issue, which it seems to be, at least from council's perspective, and I think from a lot of the stakeholders, it's something that needs to be wrestled with. And it's a combination of strategies with nonprofit, government, and private sector players. And when I say you're not alone, it's being addressed everywhere, as far as I can tell, and in municipalities in Nova Scotia. So I can't. It's best if the province and the federal government inform you about that question in particular, but also how their programs work, because there may be private sector operators here that want to participate in the RCF fund through CMHC, and they may have completely different definitions and timelines. I'm not aware of them because I've not had the experience out of going through that particular fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dave, you made the comment that the RCF funding has to be 10% below median rent.
I think that's true, yeah.
I never heard that number before.
10%?
Yeah. And the definition of affordable housing that I've always heard is what you are paying is only 30% of your income. They consider that affordable housing, and I beg to differ with that, because someone on $3,000 a month paying $1,000, and someone has $2,000 of disposable income to do whatever they want, whereas someone at $1,000 paying $300 only has $700 to do what they
Yeah.
So I find those definitions kind of
They're
out
murky.
to lunch, because there's some people that may have a lot of issues that aren't covered through pharmacare or whatever, and that puts a burden on their spending money as opposed to others. So affordable housing, to me, I don't know if you can really put a good definition on it, but they use this: if you're paying 30%,
That's correct.
it's affordable.
Yeah.
And I find that great. Or if you're paying over that, so someone getting $3,000 a month, they can easily pay $1,200-1,300, which is over the 30% easily.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, but I've never heard this. You got to be 10% below
Well, again,
median rent.
that's a specific national fund through CMHC, and I really
I thought it's median rent for that area. That
I'm pretty sure of that. And again, don't quote me on this, because this is why the action is to learn about it.
Okay.
We're not. I don't know these programs in detail. I'm about to pursue RCF myself, but I'm also aware of two national nonprofit, quote, affordable housing funds. One is called New Market Fund, and the other is called High C. Now, these were set up prior to the National Housing Strategy. The new funding and financing that's available through CMHC is specific to the National Housing Strategy, and that drives a whole different national agenda. And
that's over 10 years.
yeah, but it's also $55 billion. So it's important to try and line up as best municipal governments can, because as you probably know, if you leverage equity and if you attract investment in, that's economic development. Doesn't mean you're doing it. It means the private sector, the developer and or the nonprofit proponent, they're the ones that are doing it.
But it goes back to the previous presentation about the regulatory system that we
Yeah.
have. And here you go, you're mentioning more and more programs, and there's so many, factors in all of those programs that disqualifies
I know, it's
either nonprofits or private or whatever. That, it's tons of money. It's a nice radio blitz or whatever for government. But anybody you talk to that's tried to go through it, they spend an awful lot of time, and
I know.
especially for nonprofits. And I think our deputy warden was probably involved before with that. And I mean, the amount of work that nonprofits put into it
I know.
is outrageous to, at the end, come out with a no.
I know. I've
So,
been there recently. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's, pages
But
and
I-
pages of documentation they want provided, and reports and reports. And
Yeah,
this money is
look,
not easily accessible, but it's there.
I know.
So I don't know where it goes.
I mean, and then there's the traditional financing mechanisms, which are the banks, and,
They're getting harder and harder to
Exactly.
deal
So
with.
there are issues all the way around. Financing is the major problem with attracting investment and doing housing, and especially, I think, in seniors housing, because there are some really difficult issues in mortgage financing for seniors housing.
Do you know some of those?
What the issues?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
You want to elaborate?
Sure. Financial institutions, including CMHC, will not extend mortgage financing if there's a clear indication that care services are being integrated in rent. So from their perspective, and I think you can understand this, they will not want to foreclose on a senior's home or a senior's housing project. They will not want to put seniors out on the street because there was a default. And what that means is that the organization to secure financing for seniors housing has to have a significant amount of equity if indeed it's playing in that independent or assisted living space. And that's where we need to get to, because we need to start integrating care services with age-friendly unit design and other amenities to help people live longer or help them address their housing requirements. So
age-friendly communities are not so easy to build.
no, they're not easy to quote build, but there's a lot more than just the housing piece, and there are some other things in the plan that I hope you'll find motivating. And but the housing piece, I can only suggest. I think the municipality should explore its role, and that's what this first action is. It's the reason why you don't find why we have this gap is because of the financing issue. Okay. Do you want me to move on, or is it?
Yes. You
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
Unless there's other questions. Anybody else?
And in addition, there are other initiatives that government is trying to promote in concert with making funding available. And again, I'm suggesting that the PAC meet with CMHC to explore flex housing guidelines, social inclusion, and energy efficiency objectives. I participated on a national review group on social inclusion, which is really accessibility. But again, knowledge of these things would be useful. Dave McCullough, who's the CMHC representative, is frequently in Cape Breton, and I would recommend meeting with him on the first action, help us define our role. What do you suggest we do to assist our private operators and our nonprofit care providers and others to make the equity available and do the investments? So he's probably, on the federal side, he's your best contact there. This is an idea that came from one member of council. I can't remember who it was. I won't pinpoint you here this evening. But consider the potential surplus properties, i.e. schools, for leveraging federal and provincial funding to support for housing. A lot of municipal governments are doing that. And Warden Marchand, to get maybe to your previous presentation and your question, to waive permit fees to make this work. I've only suggested nonprofit housing, but
I thought this wasn't going to cost us anything.
well, I like to
It's a little joke.
now I like to suggest that if the housing can't be built, you're not getting the fees anyways. I don't know. Does the municipality receive the fees, or does that go to the district?
Goes to the district.
Okay, so then it's not costing you anything, or the municipal government anything. And this obviously has to be done because you're not in charge of these fees. You'll have to get some colleagues, some neighbors to participate. Ideally, all of the municipal units that support the Eastern District Planning Commission. It may be possible to waive them for private sector affordable housing initiatives, but again, the bugaboo is how do you define what that is? So it might be if a private developer is participating in one of these government programs which has some or a majority of the rents at or below market, then that might be something also worth thinking about. So it's something to keep in mind as you go through these 4 actions actually and consider. I think all of these are fairly easy to do. It's just gaining information and determining what your role is, with the exception of this one. It is probably something that you can start, but I don't think it would be accomplished within a year. You're going to have to get your municipal colleagues involved, agree to this, number one, and I think if it was unanimous, you could probably convince the Planning Commission to do what others are doing, and that includes Halifax Regional Municipality, which has just this year waived all of its permit fees, with the exception of Halifax Water, for non-profit housing organizations. The District of Chester, which is waiving permit fees and purchasing land for a housing project in New Ross. And my work this year in St. John's, Newfoundland, they are also waiving fees for non-profit housing providers. There may be some private operators, again, that can benefit from this, but I think you're going to have a test. So I don't know if you can get the fees waived for everybody. And they're not really extensive, so I don't know if they're that. I think it's more the red tape that's the issue than the actual cost of the permit.
So how do you get private developers to come in when they know rules are being changed for nonprofits?
That's a good question, and
you're going to lose all of that, and the nonprofits are going to want taxes
but
reduced.
it's a question of scale, because there aren't that many nonprofits that are actually either in the municipality right now. You've got your 2 long-term care facilities. I don't think they're doing or have expansion plans, and it's a question of whether one might be attracted in.
When you're saying 2 long-term?
I think so.
You're talking the Villa and St.
Yes,
Anne's.
I am, yeah.
Okay. No, you probably won't get no private getting into that.
No, for the financing issue that I talked about. But there's a project I was involved with where a private developer has secured a fairly significant plan amendment and opportunity for seniors housing in Fall River, and they've done it in partnership with Northwood, which is a very large nonprofit care provider. So the benefit of that is when he goes for his financing, he says, I'm building apartments, and these care services are entirely optional, but they're also being provided by a qualified care provider. So I think he's going to get through that maze and come up with, quote, independent living. And I believe that with that sort of strategy, you might be able to extend people's ability to age well in place. We'll see. As I mentioned, housing is economic development. The housing industry is 24% of the country's GDP. I don't know what it would be here. I suspect it's fairly significant if you have real estate agents, insurance companies, builders, contractors, suppliers, whether it's renovations or upgrading or new construction. And as we talked about, when you attract equity or attract investment, that is bringing economic development into the municipality. There's been some interesting work done in Kings County where they've looked at the rationale for promoting affordable and seniors housing, because it helps reduce government expenditures on other programs as well as create jobs. And we're talking about building better communities, redirecting tax dollars to more effective programs that have true long-term residents in the community, and improving business and residential environment for everyone. We had a session here one beautiful July evening, and the Seniors Take Action Coalition attended, along with a couple of other individuals. I had hoped to attract some business people, but none came out. it was really too nice of an evening. And we had a very interesting discussion about community economic development. And it was interesting hearing the perspective of older adults around the table. So this is a goal that came out of that session specifically, as well as the actions, to identify community economic development assets and increase opportunities for CED supports that increase immigration and support for older adults. The issues they identified were seniors housing, home accessibility and outreach efforts and solutions. They represent an investment in the local economy. There's no value proposition or list of benefits defining why people might want to live in Richmond County. Those are their words, not mine. Immigrants attracted to Richmond County may not stay, and older adults need access to trusted maintenance and trade services. So from an age-friendly community lens, those were the issues and the goal. I'm just going to look at a couple of objectives and actions. Use community multimedia to create intergenerational opportunities that will highlight cultural etiquette and Richmond County's assets. The main asset being that Richmond County is a warm and welcoming community for residents, newcomers, and visitors. This action, there may be others I can't remember right now, but this particular one was to investigate cultural innovation funding, of which there is some, and develop a series of videos that highlight Richmond County's local cultures, natural environment, elder stories, and other community assets. So here's an example of an action where if the STAC and Toledo Community Television can collaborate on this, something may well evolve. And it's suggested that start within a year of the adoption of the plan. And the other one, I would confess that this is something I brought to the table, and I'll explain why in a minute, is to involve the community in promoting immigration and promote multiculturalism. And the action is to identify local opportunities within the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project, for example, opportunities to attract pre-med students, LPNs, and continuing care assistants from French-speaking countries. Now, how did I end up with that thought? It's because from the stakeholders that I met with, the St. Anne's Centre and Richmondville are already trying to attract CCAs or continuing care assistants. And I learned from Université St. Anne that they have CCA extension courses being delivered right here on Ile Madame or can be made available. And they also have access to pre-med qualifying for pre-med students. The Cape Breton Partnership, I believe, is in charge of the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. And I learned from La Picasse that their preference for the French population here is that they receive care services in their older years in their first language, and that was an issue as far as they were concerned. So I don't know if this would work, but it seems that a targeted focus on French-speaking countries, if these players can come together, this is going to be a longer-term effort, of course, but what else would you attract? What's your niche? And I thought this was something worth throwing out there and seeing if it had any legs. So the French-speaking countries, they're in the Caribbean and they're in Africa. Those may well be qualifying students or others to come here, live here, and work here. But and it ties it back to the jobs, the knowledge of the job requirements and the opportunities for the jobs associated with seniors housing. Maybe it's far-fetched, but you have to find out what your niche is and align your assets accordingly. And even if the only thing that came out of this was the knowledge that we should have CCAs that are bilingual and can administer care services in, say, home care, I think that would be through the VON. I believe they're now in charge of the delivery of home care in Richmond County. It's a big topic. I'm going to suggest that 38 actions is pretty ambitious. But when you set up your age-friendly community team, they will ferret that out. I think that the low-hanging fruit is achievable. And some of them, like the last one, may be quite complex, but you have to look at all the issues facing the municipality, the loss of population, the challenge with housing, the need for aging well in place. We didn't talk about transportation or social inclusion or civic participation. Your recreation department was actively involved in the goal on civic participation. And you'll see similar actions or objectives proposed right across the 9 goals. It is ambitious, I do admit that, but it's a start, and it's a way to position the county for better opportunities and dealing with some extremely complex issues. For rural Nova Scotia, you're not alone in what you're going through, and I know that there's a can-do attitude in rural communities. That's why I love working in rural Nova Scotia. So I think that you can move forward with it. You will need that structure first and foremost, and I can certainly try and answer any other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Any questions from council? Deputy Warden Martel.
Thanks, David, for the presentation. The thing about the age-friendly project, and not wanting to sound negative, is that like in the past years we've done a lot of this, and it wasn't always towards age-friendly. But some of the stuff that are being highlighted in your research, in your consultation, are similar to what we've already have found that the problems are. The problem that I find that we're having here, I guess maybe I don't have a question, but just a comment, is that what we're seeing is that we're getting an aging population. Mm-hmm. We're getting volunteer burnout. Mm-hmm. And when we put these things in place and we talk about setting the wheels in motion and having people, because every project needs a driver, as you know. It's always very hard to find individuals to drive the process forward. Yep. So maybe people start off with good intention. As far as consultation and putting out what the problems are, that's simple enough. Every time you go out, people have lists. It's like a kid with a Sears catalog at Christmas. It's a wish list. They want this, they want that. Then the problem becomes, number one, who drives it, the process, and then who pays for it. So that's what I think that we've been experienced for a long time, and I'm not saying that this won't work, and I'm sure it can work, because I mean it's simple enough. It's just to get the appropriate people. When it comes to nonprofits doing housing, we've experienced that in the past. We've tried to find a solution or a way to do affordable housing. One of the biggest challenges was finances. Mm-hmm. And the other side of the finances was that if you have a group of volunteers sitting around a table and you've got a project that's worth $1.5 million and you need to finance it, it's hard to get those volunteers to sign on the dotted line. Yep. To get the money to do it. And a lot of times when you look at the project and you put the proposal together, sometimes it's not feasible. Yep. And on the private sector side, we've talked to private sector people, their problem is it's not feasible for them to do the project if they're not making money. Yep. So it's really hard. So again, I think a very important point that you're making for a municipality, for myself as a municipal councillor, what is our role in all of this? Yeah. What can we do as municipal councillors, as a municipal unit? Because when it comes to finances, we're like every other municipal unit. We're restricted by what we have and what we can spend. I mean, it's all these issues, and how do we kind of divide it up and be able to spend the money that's needed? Because, I mean, there certainly is a need. I mean, people keep telling us, people tell us every day on the street. Yeah. It's just that we as councillors don't really know what our role can be and how much we can provide at our level.
There are many roles that municipal governments can play. Sometimes you are confined to what the Municipal Government Act allows you to do. But I don't believe I put it in here, and probably for good reason, because this isn't a housing plan, but your housing goal is, I think, maybe the closest maybe we've been able to start. What is our role, therefore what sorts of plans, what kind of partnerships, what kind of efforts like waiving fees, what exactly does that get us or get the developer, the nonprofit developer or the affordable housing developer, what exactly is the payback? How can we facilitate leveraging financing? What's our role? And what's not in the document, I have something on my website I'd be happy to send you called 20 things that municipal governments can do to promote affordable housing. Obviously, the size of the municipality has a bearing. Your finance, your capability to look at, if you're not losing anything on permit fees, I would certainly go after that. It's a small thing, but CMHC will check that box off on their seed funding. So they have something called seed funding, which is to provide for organizations a way to do that feasibility, to do the project planning work. And one of my projects is being supported right now by seed funding, and we hope to build 45 units of affordable housing for seniors and mental health consumers in Dartmouth on, 13,000 square feet of land, 6 stories above a social enterprise space. I don't know if we'll get there, but we have the resources to do the financing piece, which is why I'm now immersed in RCF and these other two, or I'm about to be immersed in how complicated is this going to be to leverage that money. That's financing that comes into Main Street in Dartmouth, and it's part of their redevelopment plans. Yeah, it's time consuming and it's complicated, but we have to explore these things. Otherwise, it just becomes an ongoing talking point on the street corners.
But anyway, it's like I said, we've been at it for a long time, and I know, like all other councils, I know we're talking about housing, to go just a little beyond that, when you talk about people that are already living in their own homes and can't afford to. They're talking about the elderly that need somebody to cut their firewood, or somebody to mow their lawn, or something to plow their driveway. All of these councillors here have heard that time and time again.
Yeah.
Where how do we fight that? How do we get those people what they need to stay in their homes so that we don't have to build affordable housing? It's not simple.
Yeah, it came out in that economic development meeting, and I think there's an action specifically on that. If I can just thumb through it. I didn't really know what to select to put in front of you, because it can be a little daunting. But I think if you just set aside the statistics, you'll find that it's about 25 pages of goals and actions. So if you want to just bear with me, I'll see if I can find that. It might be under the health one. There's an effort, I think it's either a cooperative or might have been I'm sorry, I've forgotten it, but that is addressed. It was addressed at the meeting, so it ended up in the document, I think. I'm looking at the wrong goal here. That's why. The transit is also one that the steering committee took a lot of effort in, and that's really in the hands of the Straight Area Transit to mobilize some things. You should read that as well, because I know that transportation is also quite a serious effort. Communications came up a lot. The county's communication, the newsletter. Those were...
That's a good thing?
As a good thing, yes, but I think positioned maybe a little differently. There seemed to be the internet access and the social media awareness was also quite a challenge to work through that stuff. Social media, the recreation department's efforts at promoting opportunities for civic participation and recreation through social media. I will look and find that particular, but I encourage you to read the 25 pages if you can't read the 61 or whatever it is. Okay?
Any more questions? Dave, you said you were going to speak of implementation.
Yes, so that was just the goal that I referenced, and goal 9, because from here on in, if you decide to adopt this, or if council decides to adopt it, then your very first thing that you need is a structure to oversee the actions and that are proposed here.
So you're saying that committee should be involved in that?
Should they be involved in it? Yeah. You'll see in the terms of reference. Maybe I should just go there. It's on the very last page. It's on page 69. The purpose is to oversee the implementation of the Richmond County Age-Friendly Community Plan in collaboration with the municipality. There's a proposed membership here. This is a draft that I believe was vetted by staff. It's not proposed as a committee of council. It could be, but one member of council was proposed to sit on it, and then you'll see the other list there. There's about eight bullets. The responsibilities are to raise awareness of the importance of the age-friendly planning, implement it, identify champions and partners to help implement it, and then update the plan regularly. That's proposed 2 times a year, although I called it a team. I thought committee was a little standard. Would be to meet 6 times a year. Terms of involvement, ideally staggered membership would be the best way to go about that. And it's going to have to be resourced by a staff member in terms of documenting decisions and then ultimately helping to update the plan. So that once that is set up, then some of the other, I think everything will start to fall into place, but will start to be amended too. I'll just go through the other ones. There's a proposal to train champions. There was some funding, it may still be available from the province, to help mobilize more volunteers. So that's in here. Your data should be updated when you have the opportunity to do that, particularly the census, if you can, because I think monitoring trends is important. Look at the goals and objectives when you're updating other policies and plans, and then become recognized as an age-friendly community. That's important too. The province is planning on setting up its own certification process, but you can apply to the World Health Organization, but I would encourage working with the province. I was informed that there's an age-friendly network being established for Atlantic Canada. I don't believe that's set up yet, but the 4 provinces are talking about it. So that, in a nutshell, would be implementation.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Presentation.
And I appreciate working with you. I hope this works for you. It is working in other communities. I know it can work. And yeah, it's tough sledding. You're right. It's really challenging. So if I can help, you know where I am, particularly on the housing piece. I'm happy to give advice to anybody about my experiences. I'm currently working on 4 nonprofit housing initiatives, and not just in HRM. And I just finished a major effort with a private seniors housing developer. tough stuff, but we've got to try to solve our housing needs and our other aging issues. So I really encourage you to move forward, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to have helped. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
And I'm not driving home tonight.
On to our third presentation, Lois Landry, Richmond County Early Development Instrument.
Yeah, hi. I'm Lois Landry. I'm the principal at Richmond Education Center and Academy and Felix Marchand Education Center in Louisdale. And I am very pleased to report that I am not here to ask for any money. I am here to share some information and also get some advice. So I will start off with that premise. So I want to speak to you a little bit about something that unfolded while I was principal at Felix Marchand last year, and some information that has been reported to the schools across the province. I'm privy to the information about the Strait Regional Center for Education schools in Richmond County. So that would be, the elementary schools would be East Richmond and Felix Marchand. So the province has decided to use what's called an early development instrument to get a sense of how preschoolers fare before they come to school. So that gives you a sense of what the EDI is. And so I'm here to present some of the results across the province and how we in the Strait region, which is the Quad Counties, fare, and then to tease that out a little bit and look at Richmond County. So if you take a look at this is administered really every 3 years or so. So if you look at the results in 2015 and then compare them to 2018, in fact, most of the rest of the province, with the exception of the Strait Regional Center for Education, which used to be known as the Strait Regional School Board, the other parts of the province and every other jurisdiction has actually gotten worse. So outcomes for children in terms of the percentage of children that are vulnerable in one of those 5 areas has actually gone up. So things have gotten worse in each part of the province, with the exception of the Strait region. So when you first look at that data, that's rah-rah good for us. So we've gone from 32% of our kids being vulnerable in at least one domain to down to 23. So that's a really great result, and on one level that is very promising. If you wanted to know what we did about that, I think the best way to look at that is how each county fared. So if you look at the 2018 data, where our results were certainly much better than they had been 3 years ago, the results look very different if you tease out the 4 counties within the Strait region. So green on that slide is actually Richmond County, and this is one area where it is not great to be the winner. So what we have here is that 32.5% of children in Richmond County who attend Strait Regional School Board schools. I can't speak to Beauport because I'm not privy to their information, but and it's very difficult to get CSAP data because it's spread out across the whole province. But I find it difficult to believe that children who are living a mile apart would necessarily be that different in terms of their exposure to their ability to socialize and so on. And what I can tell you is that there's very little difference in data between Felix Marchand and East Richmond. So what this is saying is that 32.5%, essentially 1 in 3, of children in Richmond County are vulnerable in at least one. 17.5 are actually vulnerable in 2 areas. That's not a good news story. The good news story is Guysborough. So if you take a look at Guysborough and Antigonish, but Guysborough in particular, they were at 16.3%, and going back further, they were actually higher than that. And they've gone down to 4.7% of their children. So the quick solution to this is we have to do what Guysborough did. So I want to speak a little bit about that. Before I go any further, I will tease out that data for you a little bit. And the results are really not, they're difficult to look at, to be honest. So if you take a look at how our children are faring in terms of physical health and well-being, 6.6% of the kids in the Strait region are vulnerable in that area. We're at 20. So 20% of kids are vulnerable in Richmond County around social competence, whereas the provincial average, for example, is 11.2, 15% in emotional maturity. So on those three domains in particular, language and cognitive development, we actually are holding our own, and communication skills, it's not so bad. But certainly there's a lot of blue in that picture, and it can be a little discouraging at first. And again, just to revisit this, 32.5% of kids in our community are vulnerable in at least one area. So, to tease out how the individual counties did, in 2015, Guysborough had worse results than we have now. So 34.8% of their children were vulnerable in at least one domain. And they have brought that down to 16.3. That is a 53.2% reduction in their ability to help children from birth to February of their primary year. That is really significant. Now, all areas in the Strait region made some progress, but what I want to speak to a little bit is what we can do to sort of steal some of their ideas and make a difference. And what we can see from Guysborough is that a difference is absolutely, can be made. So what did they do? Guysborough took their results and shared them with anybody who would listen. And I believe the first thing they did was actually a presentation to council, which is why I'm here tonight. So they established the Guysborough County Early Years Networking Committee, and it was meant to look at these results within Guysborough County and what would the entire community and everybody who's vested in that community do to make a difference. So they got together with interestingly, Adult Learning Association, Guysborough County First, the municipality, particularly through their recreation department, but not just their recreation department. Early intervention was involved, as well as primary and public health services and Schools Plus. So if you remember back to the Teresa McAvoy case, where Archie Billard was a young person who was out on parole and supposed to be in court, and he crashed into this woman. Remember, she was a TA on her way home. That's how Schools Plus was started. It was really to share and bring partners together around young people. But Schools Plus, one of the pilot schools was, I believe, in Guysborough County. So this was one of the things that they took on, and their goal was to establish partnerships from the beginning. So in terms of what they've done, they have looked at ways to identify the problems, find ways for all of the partners to contribute in their own way. They focused on the needs of rural communities, and they shared their EDI data with everybody who would listen. They continue to take action, sharing best practices within each of their areas of expertise, and really trying to promote family engagement across the county as a united group. One example of that, I don't have the videos, you can look them up on Facebook though, is they created a series of videos. They're only about 2 minutes long, and they share them on Facebook. So one of them is a young mother who's got her little boy on his lap, and she's just talking about the importance of reading to young children. They continue to meet, and they'll do things like look at what are the barriers to getting our children engaged and families engaged. In Guysborough, as examples, they've identified a lack of childcare options and transportation. So they continue to work together over these last several years. So they have their own Facebook page as an example, and they have several videos. So they've used social media to try and reach people at the far reaches of their county. I could go on at length about that, but I think to follow up on a point made in the previous presentation, in terms of low-hanging fruit, what are some things that we can do to start to say, okay, we have a problem, and how are we going to move forward right away? So, and I don't want to, I think it's really important to be really clear about the importance of this. So this is just a screenshot from that last video, but the research says that vulnerable children are more likely to have poor outcomes academically, emotionally, and in relationship with peers. So not for nothing, but these are the kids that are going to look after us when we're old. But these are also the kids who are going to go on to hopefully get jobs here, find places to live, which determines the amount of property tax they're going to pay, and so on and so forth. So our ability to be a viable community moving forward is only made better if we can do some work with some of these families and children early on. So the payout, as they've said, I believe is between $4 and $8 for every dollar that's invested. So I'm not looking for dollars. There's actually quite a number of funding sources available. It's really how do we move forward as a group. So what can we do? So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the very, very, very low hanging fruit that we're working on at this point. And I'm open to some suggestions about how we move forward from there. So one of the things that we are doing at Felix Marchand, which is why I'm presenting here, is every school has to have a school improvement plan. And one of the things that school improvement plan has to have is a goal for literacy, a goal for math, and a goal for wellness. And we identified at Felix Marchand many of the things that help with vulnerable students. So promoting good physical and mental health strategies that will improve physical and mental health, for not just for the children, but for families. So that expanded to Richmond Education Center and Academy, because if Felix Marchand was doing the work, there's really no reason why the big school couldn't sort of harness some of that energy. And then Sonia Sauvé, principal at East Richmond, said, well, why not make this a trifecta? We are toying with some communications with Beauport and with Baudelaire, so we are starting to partner in those areas as well. One of the things that I'll tell you is this is probably the first time that I've been involved in public education that I've seen a group of schools get together as a county. I don't think there's ever been a time where we've done that. So we've decided to work on what the research tells us are 8 things that really promote positive physical and mental health. And 8's a good number in public education. Get rid of September, get rid of June, and that leaves you with 8 more months. So we've targeted one of those pillars in each of the 8 other months. So in each month, we have one. I'll tell you what they are in a second, but we roll out the theme for that month using social media. So now, for the first time, we have Facebook and Twitter accounts for the schools. We then develop for the classroom teachers activities that they can do in their classrooms that are still based on curriculum outcomes, but actually promote that particular theme. Then anytime teachers come up with their own ideas, we also promote that and expand that out. We are working with our families to promote the theme to our families, but also to our community stakeholders. I'll tell you about that in a second. We read facts of the day to the kids at each of our schools. And what we are working on now is trying to establish connections with any community group that we can. And one of the reasons why I'm not actually asking for money is we've actually generated some revenue already without trying very hard. So when the St. Peter's Lions Den heard about some of the things they were doing, they gave us a $5,000 donation. They've been very, very generous to the schools. So we use that money, we divide that by 8, and each month we use 1/8 of that money towards activities that will promote some of these activities. But even some of the smaller community groups, so Discouse, for example, has every second week they have a singer-songwriter circle at the hall in Discouse. I provide for them a PowerPoint of about 4 or 5 slides on some of these topics, and it plays in the back while they do the songwriter circle. And in exchange, they do a little silver plate collection. So we've actually gotten $100 a month from them as well. So there is certainly, I think, a sense that this is really worth doing. So October's theme was exercise, and one of the things we're really trying to do is to show that we are working together on this. So these are the 5 administrators. So Sonia Sauvé is the principal at East Richmond. That would be Lisette McDonald, who's the vice principal. Myself, Dara McDonald's the vice principal at Felix Marchand, and our own Jason. And I will tell you that some administrators are harder to work with than others. But some of the things that we've been able to do around hamming some of this stuff up has actually gotten quite a bit more chatter on some of social media posts than some of the more traditional school stuff that we've done. So as examples, at Halloween for Felix Marchand, the kids we've always given out treats in the elementary school. In order to get your treats on Halloween at Felix Marchand, you had to go through stations, and you had to exercise at each station. So in order to get the juice box from Carol Ann McPhee, you had to do 5 jumping jacks. So the kids were exhausted at the end of the day. The East Richmond did an activity where their primary students in French immersion had to do a presentation to the school about the things that their favorite exercise and how when they need to take a break, some of the things that they can do. And even in the high school, so one of our high school math classes, one of the outcomes is to do perimeter and area, very complex shaped spaces, large shaped spaces. So instead of doing that with meter sticks, they did it with strides, and Phil Sampson had them out all over the ball field, down to the soccer arena, and so on. So those are the kinds of things we've rolled out for October. In November, we're taking on good decisions about drug use, which at the high school and even junior high is exclusively vaping at this point. For our younger children, we're working on good decision making and kind of broader strokes. So just to give you a sort of spoiler alert, what the rest of the months are. December is positive social experiences and helping others. January, organization and daily routines, so that sort of links with our exams. February is bright lights, so the idea of getting outside and the importance of sunlight. March is healthy eating, which is linked to Nutrition Month. April is sleep, and May is music and movement. So those are the themes, and we've been working as a large staff to come up with those strategies. So in terms of why I'm here, I guess the low-hanging fruit is where we are now. We're certainly working as a group together, the 3 schools and partnering with some of the other schools. But what we're asking at this point is for partnerships to start to come together, and we're asking just to swim with us. So if we're all swimming in the same direction, that certainly makes things more impactful. So what does that look like? Well, we are asking that the municipality and others follow us on social media. So you can find our 2 schools and East Richmond, I believe, on Twitter. We're all on Twitter, but certainly Felix Marchand and Rekha are on Facebook. And also sort of anything that promotes what we do. So if you can share our posts, if you can sort of support what we do. But we are also asking that community groups, or particularly the municipality and its recreation department, mirror our themes. So for example, if Laurier is planning to do something on healthy eating, or healthy menus, then do that with us in March and we can promote that. So one of the things we're doing in November, for example, is we have the RCMP doing a presentation to parents in November, and we are actually inviting all parents from every school, Beaudeledec, Beauport, all the schools in the Strait region. So any ways that we can have our partners mirror our themes. We're also looking for suggestions. So we have a sense of what this looks like for us over the next 8 to 9 months. But we are looking for some partnerships, broader partnerships, moving forward. So I have a meeting with Millie Hatt, who's certainly, done quite a bit of work around networks. But that's really where we are at this point. This data is very new. It's sort of very hot off the presses this summer. And we are looking at ways that we can basically do what others before us have done. And although the data is, a little discouraging when you look at it up front, I will tell you that if other people have done right by this population of kids, then we can too. So that's really the focus of where we are for the next couple of years. That's it, yeah. So I'm open to questions or suggestions if you have either.
Any questions? Lois? Yeah, but I just want to ask her something.
Sure.
You started off with EDI, and then we went into many other things. So I thought maybe you were going to speak of your assessments in February and what you do. You're speaking of the whole year here, so I thought this was kind of early.
No, the
Preschool.
EDI is a measurement. It's an inventory that's taken by every primary teacher in the province in February does it, and they only do it every 3 years. And so that happened in February of 2018, and those results rolled out a little bit later. So based on that data, that's where the results come from. So the EDI inventory led to this statistical hopper. The numbers that came out of the hopper said that about a third of our children are struggling in one area or more.
But I thought you were going to speak more about the pre-primary group. You want to get that group because you're speaking of primary up.
Right, yeah. So in terms of we, as a teacher, as a, member of the public school system, we have some of our children in pre-primary, that's true. However, what we're looking at is how does the school partner with other places to get that 0 to 5, 0 to 5 age group. So not all children are in pre-primary. And what do we do from before they get to pre-primary? And I think some of the improvement that you saw in Strait Region is probably due to the fact that pre-primary rolled out just as between that 2015, 2018. But that hasn't brought our results down enough. So what we're looking at doing is how do we counteract some of the data that we're seeing, some of the realities of what our kids have started school with, but how do we expand that so that our kids are not starting out in that way when they come to primary or pre-primary? Does that make sense? Answer your question?
But that's not something that you're going to be doing in school. That's more a community.
Right, and the school has a role to play as part of that partnership,
Okay.
but it isn't, we don't go and before they start even pre-primary, we don't have access to them. But we do have access to their families, and we do have access to a large number of people in the county. So that's sort of where we're starting, and we're looking to partner from there.
With groups. Deputy Warden?
Yes. Yeah, it's very interesting, the data, and you talked about EDI, and I'm understanding now it's a provincial thing, statistics that come out to warrant what you guys are doing now. So how do you identify the people who are just, whatever you do it for everybody, no matter what?
The children, you mean?
Yeah, you don't
so-
identify certain children, or
Right.
so it's just for everybody.
Yes, so every...
There's no way that you can identify who are the people, the kids in need or anything like that.
No, in fact, part of the reason why, like, I'm not allowed, for example, even to share specific school data. I can only share our county data, and that is because for privacy reasons we wouldn't want to do that. It is the primary teacher in that classroom who's completing these inventories. So at the same time that information is going up the line and getting crunched up there, we certainly do see the kids that are in our schools and are struggling. So we've put programs in place. So Schools Plus, as an example, has been putting on programs, after school programs, homework clubs, that kind of thing, for a lot of our children. We've also invested in our school, for example, no doubt because we've seen some of the, what the results are showing us, but we see them with real little faces. Laurie Backerdax, as an example, wrote a proposal and got $5,000 worth of equipment for Felix Marchand for just play-based equipment. So, and it would have been those kinds of concerns that caused her to, sit down and write those proposals and get those materials for that very young group of children coming into the school.
So you identify the need as you go along, and this program here is more of a broader scale that captures everybody, whether they need it or not.
Right, and so we are, schools have always been fairly good at saying, okay, here's what we've got, how do we make things better for these kids? But it does suggest that we are swimming upstream a little bit if a third of our children are coming to school vulnerable in at least one area. So what can we do to decrease that number? What can we do so that the very good work that teachers are doing is even more impactful? So that's really where the request for, the quest for broader partnerships comes.
Yeah, so I guess we're touching both sides of the spectrum. Earlier we're talking about seniors, now we're talking
Yes.
about children. So
Yeah, we are, very much so.
have to meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, but one of the things in the presentation, right, was about we want to make sure that Richmond County remains a viable place for people to consider moving. And so right now, Guysboro's looking really good. And so how do we look more like Guysboro? What do we do to make children more able to be successful as they move up through the spectrum?
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Very good.
Any more questions or comments? Thank you, Lois, and we look forward. Well, I'll allow it this time, but the worst is if I make an exception one time, everybody else is going to want it. So you can say what you want.
So I think an excellent partner is the Dr. Kingston Memorial Community Health Center, because we
Yeah.
So it does help to extend backward.
Yeah, we've been involved in some intergenerational activities. So we had some students from grade 9 who went to the villa. We've had some primary students who have gone to grade 11. All of those things are things the school has done and we will continue to do. I think one of the things we're looking at is, instead of having those as one-offs, how do we have a group of people that are committed to saying, if we're all swimming in that direction and we are strategic about it, then we can be even more impactful than the individual sort of one-offs that are less strategic in nature.
So you're saying if you get them in pre-primary, some of the issues that they've had up to that point, be it family, community issues, there's good resolve to those issues?
I'm sorry, say again?
The issues that you're seeing on, these 5 to 8
Yeah.
issues, are you seeing results in the Guysborough studies or elsewhere that you're reversing the effects of the first 4 years of their life before they get into the school system?
We actually got a presentation as a group of principals, and it's very interesting that you really can out-teach very many factors. So we've seen great success with implementation of programs through the primary to 3, 4 to 6, 9 to 12. So we have literacy mentors in the school, and we have Schools Plus facilitators and so on. And so all of that is very promising, and the results are good. I guess what I'm suggesting is the more we do at the early years, the more impactful all of that is going to be. So if you want to renovate your house, it's probably best to start with the foundation and not the roof. So that's what we're really looking at here, is how do we go as far back as we can go and say, here's how we want to have the best students at the best of their ability in each grade level that we have them in. So the resources we put in place become even more effective.
Okay. Any more questions? Thank you very much, Lois.
Yep.
On to item 5, which has to do with straight area transit. And everyone's gotten the email or copy of it. What they are asking for is $2,100 from this municipality, and as it states in the email, improvements to the website, new phones for the office, uniforms, GPS units for the buses. And I can't say any more really because I wasn't at a meeting that this was discussed. So I think it's something that has just come up, and maybe at the SAT meeting in December I'll know a little more about exactly where that cost has come from. But does council want to deal with this now, or Port Hawkesbury, I believe, has made a motion to support this, as well as Inverness. If there's any questions, I can try to answer them. Councillor Gayesh?
Yeah, you said there is a meeting coming up in December?
December the 13th, I believe.
Okay, I need more information on this because the request actually is not, does not include any kind of office supplies or whatever. It says $2,100 is our share of $4,200 for GPS, strictly GPS. It doesn't say how many GPS they want, for what purpose, and why
No, it
GPS.
doesn't.
And I think there's a lot of information I need on this, and how much does individual GPS cost? You're looking at $2,100, and I don't have any back information. There's no information attached to it.
No, there's nothing.
As to what it costs for a GPS and what actually the GPS would do, and how many transit buses is there or vehicles that the GPS is going to supply. I don't have any information at all, only a request for $2,100. And I think if you have that meeting in December, this will be the time to
What I'll
question.
do, I'll try to get some more information,
Okay, thank you.
even before the meeting. Councillor Boucher.
Thank you, Warden Marshall. I agree with Councillor Gayesh that first of all, these people are looking for $7,300 as an estimate to improve the website, new phones, office supplies, uniforms, and GPSs. You know, we've gone through GPSs in this county. We've never seen a report on those, on any of those GPSs, so it was a waste of money. We're looking at a transit system now that we're paying $100,000 a year to. I don't feel that this county should be paying any more to that system. And I don't think they need GPSs in their buses or any of their equipment, or uniforms either. It's a taxi service as far as I'm concerned. And if they need extra money, they should put their fees up to collect their own funding, not by the taxpayers of the county. Thank you.
Any more comments? So what we'll do then, we'll wait till the December meeting, or maybe I'll have more information for the regular council in November. Okay? Do you want to add anything? Okay. On to item 6 on the agenda. Notice to be given to amend the travel expense policy in order to include Port Hawkesbury as in-county travel. That's just a notice. We don't need a motion for that, right? Somebody should give the notice. It's been moved by Councillor Gayash and seconded by Councillor Boucher. On discussion. Questions called. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion carried. Item 7 is a notice to be given to amend Section 16, titled Sick Days of the Employee Policy Manual in order to allow sick time to be taken in half-hour increments, include doctor and medical practitioner appointments, and eliminate the requirement for a note for a specialist, doctor, medical practitioner appointment. Who wants to make the motion for that? It's been moved by Councillor Boucher. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Gayash. On discussion. Questions called. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion carried. Item 8 is a review of checks. So you have the list of checks for the month of October. They'll be on our website soon. No items added to the agenda. And no in-camera session this evening, so we'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. It's been moved by Councillor Boucher. There's a seconder. Second by Deputy Warden Martel. You moved that, correct, Councillor Boucher? Yeah. And seconded by Deputy Warden Martel. On discussion. Questions called. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.